If something goes wrong in an AV-enabled space, oil, gas, airport, that's a life safety thing at some point, right? The stakes are much higher.
On this episode of the RCN podcast, the audio-visual solutions architect and chief executive officer at Senticon Design, Jon Broadbent.
I like to kind of think we're like rogue architects who designing in the Revit and the BIM space. 3D geometry on a screen and some level of detail.
Is it a digital twin if it's not 3D accurate?
From an object tracking, kind of a visual learning standpoint, AI is trying to create this meeting equity where it like crops you out, blah, 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 blah.
Now you can start mixing things like wearing AR glasses walking through the city. Is that metaverse, or is metaverse
storing that data, having humans review that data? What does that data mean? There's a lot of value that goes into that. Create a archive on a job site. That is a thing they're already really considering. This could be a real problem.
Typically, I like to start with the individual's background.
Sure.
Like dig into the story of what some of your first jobs were, like what led into the industry, what technology, when you first started touching certain technologies, maybe some of what you use now, some of what you do, some of the things that are out there that you don't yet use that you're interested.
Well, let's start at the beginning. So my first job was guitar. I know that sounds crazy to some. So, I played guitar, got it in as a teenager. And man, it turned into a like let's play for 8-10 hours a day, like regimen practice, right? Just really regimen practice, schooling and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. And then that turned into tinkering. And this is a really common problem for musicians. You start tinkering with equipment. Before you know it, that kind of, studio equipment, that's why I'm so intrigued. And, it's cool stuff, right? So we got into recording and all this sort of stuff. I used to work in an amplifier repair shop, man. We were soldering in this little room, fixing amps and stuff. Got into live music, started running a sound for some cool acts. Worked at a place here in town, ran what's known as Monitor World. So it's the monitors that the musicians have on stage, the speakers and the mix on stage. Did some really cool stuff. Funny story, I got yelled at by Redman and Method Man one night. They were both really sick, and we couldn't turn up the speakers loud enough for them to hear themselves. 5,000 people, they were like, this guy sucks. And everyone booed me for Method Man. And that was pretty funny. But seeing that, kind of being in that nightlife, that performance environment, I realized, hey, I don't want this. Yeah. So I naturally, what many musicians who are doing live performance stuff, they get in a commercial audiovisual, right? A real job, real 9 to 5. Got into that project management, design, sales sort of stuff, kind of at a small shop. And that turned into kind of where I'm at today. So to accelerate the schedule, within 8-10 years, that went from kind of getting my foot in the industry to designing, then getting onto the more technology side of that. When I say that, like the tools to make that happen, and then ultimately where we live now in the Revit and the BIM space, which has its many quirks and its own problems. And, that sort of stuff. So
let's talk through it a little bit. So what was the process before you saw or got into using Revit for design stuff? Like what types of things are people designing in your space? Sure. And what did that process look like?
It's your typical 2D, AutoCAD, Bluebeam, just whatever tool can get the job done. It's really common in the industry. But what we've realized, some of the, audio-visual, when it comes to its function within an organization, right? Any modern, thriving organization is filled. Their buildings are filled with audiovisual, commercial audiovisual, like here, right? Like even your acoustic paneling, obviously your cameras and stuff. Like this used to be a conference room, I presume, right? Yep. I can see the recessed screen and the projector. Every thriving business that's growing has this, and it's becoming even more important. Now we think, okay, well, less people are going to the office, but now the hybrid work situation is more important than ever. What that means is it has to work, right? So if you go in your office twice a week or whatever it is, you expect that technology, those tools, to work every time. And that's still an issue. I was talking to, we were just at a friend get together, and this guy, he's like, oh, I'm a doctor for one of the hospitals. He's like, what do you do? I kind of told him. He's like, oh, the conference rooms, they never work.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, that's not the goal.
That's not, yeah, but it's a weird industry, man, where as a designer, as a consultant, we can do our best, right? Like we're vetting equipment, and we're working with the architects, we're doing all the stuff to make it happen, but we're still held by the other communication technologies it all lives on. So like Teams, Zoom, Meet, I think that's really it.
Yep.
And WebEx, right?
Yeah.
If those go down, nothing works. Everyone's upset, and cell phones have to come out.
What is it about even getting into Revit and the type of things that you guys are designing and laying out, maybe for those who don't understand what you're doing, like why are you headed that direction? What do you see the benefit of getting into 3D models, and or how does reality capture fit into some of the types of work you're doing? Like where do you see those tools for your work?
Yeah, so I like to kind of think we're like rogue architects, right? So Revit being data driven, right? When you look at Revit, you can see it as 3D geometry on a screen and some level of detail, however you want to frame it. But when you start really thinking of Revit as like an immense data tool, it becomes even more powerful than we would initially think. So yeah, I mean, I love the 3D stuff, right? I think we all do.
Yep.
In terms of like being able to build these spaces and coordinate, through other disciplines and other trades, architects, end user, whatever. But when you start looking at and thinking and utilizing the data that's within Revit, and how you build your families and how to utilize them, man, it almost becomes like a true central point of truth. That's the whole concept, right? In terms of BIM, what BIM is, and we're talking Revit. Obviously, there's like Bentley and Navis, but let's just talk about Revit.
Yep.
So yeah, man, that's. So we started kind of realizing how powerful that is from a planning, sort of perspective, as well as all the other things. Like in the 2D world, when you're drawing stuff, you got to almost create. There's some smartness to it, but Revit just really takes it to the next degree.
Yep.
Which I find so funny because Revit is it's almost the same as it was back in the 80s. It's really antiquated.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
If you compare Revit to like SolidWorks or Inventor, any other sort of parametric modeling system that many are privy to, it's so backwards. So.
Yeah. I think a lot of pros and cons from the different tools, and you see certain industries really start adopting one versus the other dependent on the strengths, I think, for their use, but I think there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
Have you integrated, I think we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but have you guys integrated using scanning or reality capture in process at all? And whether yes or no, what does that look like, or how does that benefit your type of work?
Sure. So I've seen it, right? Where they're going in doing the scans, and then they're kind of doing a scan to BIM thing, right? And I think there's a lot more tools that do that now versus just manually doing it. I saw some really cool stuff when it comes to like auditoriums.
Yeah.
Right? Like, obviously things that were built 20 years ago, the plans are really antiquated. There is no BIM model, so like how do you grab that? Now you've got geometry to work from. I think in those really like bespoke, interesting stuff, man, there's a huge opportunity there. We were working with a company that wanted to do a casino, right? I think that's a good example where plans aren't up to date. Like you're not getting a Revit model of the space. So they did a scan, right, to figure out where all their these points were. So I think from my perspective, I don't see it as much as I wish I would.
Yeah.
Right. But if I was on your side of the fence, which I think we've chatted about this in the past, but yeah, man, I think I'd love to see more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the nice thing is when you start mixing all the tools, right? Like the benefits you get out of Revit and data and even just 3D perspective, right? Instead of looking at a 2D drawing, actually putting yourself in the space, and you got your line of sight type things. And, there's so many existing buildings and structures that may need upgrades, that may need renovations, that want to swap out systems, that nobody has accurate drawings. As-builts are not... I don't even know where the term came from, because they're not as-built. They're kind of like built drawings.
It's like when the project is done and they go, okay, we got to make sure we got everything wrapped up. Let's get some as-builds. Some red lines.
Checklist. It's close enough. Looks like it was built.
And when they go through so many iterations, right? Like there was a company here in town where it was like, hey, we need like accurate drawings of a ceiling space. It doesn't exist. And I was like, well, maybe you should scan it. They're like, well, how do we do that?
What is that?
Like that has to be so expensive. Like there's no way, you know. And it's like what they ended up doing is sending 4 or 5 engineers on site, laser tape measures for a week. And it's like it was an open ceiling too. So you could have scanned it pretty quickly.
So I think one of the reasons for the technology still not being mass adopted is just the lack of education, which is why we love just talking about it so much and just trying to share conversations about it, because today there should not be a project where that happens.
Right.
There are so many tools that people just don't know about, or they don't know how much it's going to cost, or they don't know how they would use the data. But if you take any building and you're wanting a reflected ceiling plan or you want a floor plan, that you should not be going out there with tape measures and paper and drawing stuff and coming back and drawing it by hand. You can scan it with so many different types of devices, so much faster, so much more accurate. You get imagery. It's one person, and the only reason that it's not happening on every single job is that people don't understand that yet.
Right.
There's those assumptions that it's like, oh, I didn't ask because I thought it was going to be so much more expensive. And you always have to go back to like, okay, if your assumption is it's so much more expensive, what are you doing if you don't do it, right? If you're not going to scan the building, what's your other option? Oh, well, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to send the team out. They're going to be out there for a week.
Verify.
It's like, okay, if you just build the proposed cost of doing it manually versus doing it with new technologies, it's cheaper and faster and better. Like all of the benefits come from the innovation.
Sure.
But it's the lack of awareness, I think, that leads to people still kind of being stuck in those older.
And I agreed. You know, what's funny is because there's also way more human error when you do it like the old way.
Oh yeah.
You know, like obviously when like point clouds are a little weird if you've never messed with it, right?
Yep.
So you might not know, but here's the thing: is that snapshot in time, that's kind of forever, right? Like, roll with me.
Oh yeah.
So like rather than like, hey, did someone grab measurements, photos, whatever of this thing? No, we didn't. Well, it's probably it would be in the point cloud.
Yeah.
So that's that snapshot in time thing is something I really like.
Yes.
You know, and that's where there's huge benefit there.
Yeah.
So then now the cost, right, really, it even becomes further apart.
Yep.
Of like, oh, now we got to go back out. Now we got to delay in the project, whatever it is, versus let me just check the point cloud and make sure I grab that, that right. Turn it into whatever geometry.
Yeah.
Needed.
That's one of the many benefits from capturing data that way is like, I came from survey background where we're going out and doing topo drawings of a whole site. And it's like, you're relying on the crew that's going out there to take a pole and shoot a point on every single object you want.
Yeah.
There is no way that something doesn't get missed.
Yeah.
You're capturing every light. You're capturing every sign. You're trying to capture the edge of road. You're at edge of pavement. There's always shots that are missed, or a shot that had a bust, or something description wasn't right. You don't know what it is. There's always those things. Same with inside of a building. You go out there with a tape measure and a notepad, and you're told to document this building. It's like you're not going to get every single corner and every single window and every single door properly, accurately. Get back and draft that. There's so much more error built in and things missed that the time saved by not having to go back to a site and just the extra detail that comes out of it it's a lot.
Yeah. And especially with just SLAM and stuff, like it's becoming just so much easier to do.
Yep.
And as technology goes on and that sort of stuff, we've even had some really cool conversations. Here's an interesting one about like real time. Okay, how do you take like LiDAR in an office space, right? Like something that's mounted up on the ceiling. How do you use that to make like real time, like hot desking decisions and stuff? And there's a lot of that going on. I think there's a company out of San Francisco. I think they're starting to do some actual LiDAR or some. There's another type of. Man, I can't recall. Anyways, to do like furniture updates. Overnight, right? So like, here's your floor layout, right, of what it is today. They change things around. Now your hot desking software has to be represented properly. So that's how it's grabbing that, rather than like floor plans, furniture plans, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to use the data. And I think that's the point that a lot of companies are at now is like they've seen the scanning. They know it's a better way to collect. Now, what all can you do with that? What all can you create? What can you use the data for? And there's a lot of companies focused on creating software to better analyze data, create models from data, all those different things.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe the future. You mentioned a minute ago, hey, do we want to get into the digital twin conversation?
Digital twins, man. So okay, I'm gonna there's a few things for this I'd like to, kind of play around with. Digital twins, man. I think, as a visual person, and there's a lot of visual people, right? It's like this all makes sense. And now it's something interesting. When we started our own digital twin efforts back in 22, that point in time where the market was in our industry, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right. Collecting data, right? However that's to be done, and that's a whole nother discussion. Storing that data, having humans review that data. What does that data mean? What can you do with all this sort of stuff? But then a lot of the manufacturers started to create their own layer of what that is, right? Some sort of remote monitoring platform, right? And then not only the manufacturers have that, but also the technology like Microsoft and Zoom. Now they have a lot of this sort of stuff. So it really makes the landscape really diluted in terms of like what's the right solution for what teams and this and that sort of stuff versus saying like, hey, I've created this agnostic platform. It can, I've got nodes that reach out to this and that, transforms, sends over MQTT, does its thing, graphs and visuals and yada yada, versus like, oh yeah, your admin, your network admin can just pull up all this data almost natively through their Microsoft Teams portal and like understand, kind of where their AV systems are at. So it almost like it's really complicated. And there's a few other, in remote monitoring, and I know digital twins, remote monitoring, I'm kind of grouping them together.
Sure.
But for the sake of the conversation, there's platforms out there that are thriving. Right. And it might be for various reasons, but digital twins, it was a big discussion in our world back in 22, and it seems to have fallen off.
Yeah. I think that happens with a lot of, things that catch on as a buzzword or a hype for a minute. I mean, we've seen the same thing happen with metaverse over the last couple years, right? So much public hype because of a social platform that changed their name, and we're talking about immersive, and we're going to live in this VR, and all the entertainment's there. And what happens often, I think, with technologies when that buzz hits, everybody gets excited, everybody wants it, they want to catch the wave, but it's not something that's meant for everybody. It's more complicated than they thought. You have all these companies throwing the words out, so now nobody even knows what it means. What is metaverse? Right. What is digital twin?
Right.
And so a lot of the hype falls off, and a lot of people at that point are questioning, is it even a thing anymore? But it absolutely is. Same digital twins, metaverse, all of it is real still. And it's still something that is going to be part of future.
Yeah.
But it boils back down to, okay, well, who is actually still working on it? What does it mean? Even going to digital twins, right? There's so many different meanings out there. There's visual twin, which is a virtual replica or visualization. But then there's is it a digital twin if it's not 3D accurate?
Right.
Is it a digital twin if it's true data that's live, but it's not geometry? Is it a digital twin if it's a live model or a real model, but there's no live data linked? Like there's so many different things that's where the industry professionals have to get together to start defining terminology and say, here are the definitions of digital twins. Here are the different levels of them and what needs to be included or not. And then that keeps going on and on and on into the metaverse type thing. It was like, is metaverse a global digital world that everyone can log into and your banking's there and your pets are there
and you got avatars and
is that metaverse, or is metaverse all these digital environments all linked together with live data? I almost picture it as the future of, we right now look at like, okay, we reality capture a building, right? We have this digital model. Now that the next level is, okay, let's take that model into actually live data, historic information, things we can query, live sensors.
Yeah.
That's kind of the digital twin world. To me, metaverse is like the next level of, okay, we don't just have digital twin of a building. We have a digital twin of every building in the city with actual data in a environment that can be accessed and logged into.
Sure.
And now you can start mixing things like wearing AR glasses walking through the city.
Yeah.
And now you can see live information. And to me, the future, which I think that's still quite a ways out, but I think metaverse is a real thing that will be there based on all of these things merging and working in the future.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's also this thing of like, can you run simulations?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like at least to some degree, like what is a simulation? But like, can that be done in this digital twin platform? And I think some people argue like, you know, you got to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
So that's just another variable in there.
Yeah. And the other thing is for all of these technologies, from my perspective, there doesn't have to be one definition. It needs to work for a company or an industry, right? Like a large organization could define their own meaning to what is a digital twin to us and what value do we need out of it.
Right.
If we talk about like asset owners that are pursuing things like that, right? Like airports and oil and gas facilities and real estate owners, like can they look at all these tools and say, look, we don't care about this kind of information, but what we really want to know is this. And we want it on every building and we want to be able to access it. So organizations can have their own reasons and their own benefits out of an ecosystem of these technologies that maybe is what they need, but it's not what the whole community needs.
Yeah, no, you really hit the nail on the head, because when you know, if I were just to like kind of take that same approach on the industry I'm in, if something goes wrong in a AV enabled space, it's not going to be that bad, right? Even if it was a big, you know, high value meeting, like the worst thing that happens is people bust out their phones and they get on their phone, right? All right, problem solved. Oil, gas, airport, you know, that's a life safety thing at some point, right? Like it could be a really, you know, it's the stakes are much higher.
Totally.
So that's where it does make a lot more sense. And like you said, when that organization has their own definition of like those different levels and what they can do and add-ons and modules and whatever it may be, totally makes sense. You know, we're part of a project right now where it's the really big one in town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, bunch of cranes.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They are so right now they're just still in a planning design phase, and the Revit families have like 25 just crazy parameters. Every discipline, these insane parameters, which I'm guessing, you know, and their whole objective is a digital twin.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of starting at least. What I'm getting to though is they're starting that effort so early on in the process, right? Where they have a defined vision and obviously scope and like what this is going to do. It's a big production facility, so it makes sense, right? So yeah, totally agree. What that definition should be molded around the objectives for that organization.
Yep. What are some other technologies that you see out there right now, even if you're not using them yet, that are piquing some interest or you see some potential for?
Oh man, so just like everything else, AI, super big. You know, Microsoft Copilot, you know, that's kind of baked into Teams, what that can do. Cameras are all AI. And that makes sense, right? From a object tracking, kind of a visual learning standpoint, having some edge node within that camera that's doing some better stuff. So back to that whole idea of like these systems, these spaces that have this technology have to be really great now. There's this like the buzzword, meeting equity. I don't know if you
I haven't.
Okay, so like right now we're probably, you know, we could share 50-50 of the screen, you know, and the viewers watching it, but put 10, 14 people in a room, like people are really far away, people are really close, like what's that like? So now AI is trying to create this meeting equity where it like crops you out, you know, blah, blah, blah. Same with the audio, just the whole experience. Yeah. Right. So for those who don't know, in terms of like, you know, some people, it's really hard to understand like what's an AV enabled corporate space.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen like in a movie where they've got, you know, people sitting in a boardroom and then there's a TVs on the wall and there's a guy talking and that sort of stuff. Those spaces are kind of what I'm talking about, right? Kind of at a big level. And some companies have hundreds and hundreds at one location.
Yeah.
So
totally.
It's critical for these things to work internally, externally. So there's a lot of value that goes into that.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of those trades or focuses or niches that most people don't think about. They just want to walk into a room and they assume, oh, well, there's going to be a screen. You guys, you have an audio connection, right? Like all this is going to work seamlessly, right?
Yeah.
Well, someone's has to put that all together, and there's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. And it's funny because you could group that. It's typically grouped as a low voltage sort of category. Same with like your fire system, your access control, your security system, your cable, your structured cabling in the wall. But it's really the only one where your end users touch it.
Oh yeah,
they touch it and they experience it.
Yeah,
like I'm assuming if the fire goes off, the fire alarm's going to do its thing.
Yeah, but you're not having problems with it every day, or like you're not.
It's not critical. it's not like this critical part to business.
Yes,
right. Like I got to get on this meeting with this new client or whatever it is. Right.
Yep.
That's critical to some degree to conduct business. So to paint that reference of what that kind of specialty is.
Yep.
AI in the cameras. That's big now. Everyone's trying to go after that. There's a big convention next week, so people won't see this before then. But Infocom down in Las Vegas, about 40,000 people. All the big vendors show up, and I'm sure there's gonna be tons of AI.
Yeah,
camera tracking, just that experience, what that's like. Camera tracking's been around for a long time, but it's been kind of poor.
Yeah,
whether you got a fob in your pocket tracks you, or some guy actually controlling it or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So we're probably going to see a lot more of that, for the end user experience. So from on the design side, this one's weird. I'd like to know more about this as well. Like, we take this super antiquated piece of software, Revit.
Yep.
I think there's still Lisp coding in that makes, which is a really old type of program language. How does it, and there's some parties out there right now that are creating like kind of AI add-ons, right? And whether it's for like rendering, different looks, that sort of stuff. But how does it work in production?
Yeah.
And I think like natural language processing is a really wonderful tool, especially for someone like me who I can't formulate the most complete and coherent sentences.
Yes. I love it.
So if I was like, hey, I need, these rooms with these views and yada yada, these templates applied, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love thinking about how something as simple as like the things we play with right now with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And the simple things that it can do, but then taking that idea and amplifying it, okay, 5 years down the road, how does something like that get integrated into our software and it get trained to be able to read our data? Like, imagine you have the point cloud, right? You said earlier, it's tricky. It's weird to mess with if you're not used to 3D, you're not used to point clouds. You don't know exactly how to get the information you want out of it. And then you have all this imagery and, okay, well, what if in several years you can just ask the software the question.
Yeah.
You can ask ChatGPT within a 3D software, how many light switches are in this building?
Yeah.
And now you don't have to go figure out and pan through and look for things. It can analyze the data just like it does with information right now, with words, with searching the web, with whatever, and actually pull real information out. I think there's going to be massive power as those worlds start to collide of pulling that information, pulling the query, pulling AI, feeding it the type of data, having it learn how to extract information we're interested in as professionals.
Yeah, yeah.
That's going to be pretty interesting.
Or like, to piggyback on that, how cool would it be to like, let's say you're a point cloud, right? And like you select your object thing and you say, hey, I need to pull, this XYZ data from it in, this kind of format. Something like that, where then it's like
just makes it for you, makes the chart.
That alone, that collector piece today can be so confusing depending on, what equipment you're using, right?
Yeah.
Even at an industrial level. And there's all these other add-ons and modules you can do now.
Yep.
But man, if you can say, kind of give it some connector like wishes, right? And how that data, what sort of data, what's it polling, all this sort of stuff, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah. And it's, I think we're going to see so much growth there in such a short amount of time, right? Like things are moving so quickly right now especially around AI. AI has been there forever, right?
Sure.
But the ability to start pulling it in and doing custom things with it is moving very quickly. And there's a lot of companies focused on creating software, integrating processes like that within our space. I don't think it's going to take very long for some of these things to move a lot further than we're expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when you said that, though. Like, I think yesterday, OpenAI went down for a bit. And I saw it all over my LinkedIn feed when it's like, hey, all you startups, you're probably broken right now.
Yeah.
And then I made a comment to some guy like, hey, I used Gemini today. I forgot, Google's version.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't know if I want to segue into like the chaos it could be if we're all on like this one platform.
Oh, sure.
No,
Why
I mean,
not?
like, I don't have
It's true.
It is, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
You can't. We are becoming very dependent on technology in whole.
Oh, yeah.
In society.
Yeah.
I joke about it, except not joking, all the time. I'm like, man, if the grid goes down, if our phones go down, if internet, I'd be lost.
Yeah.
I live on the technology.
Yeah.
I rely on it for so many things now, and businesses are forming around the tools. That it's true. We do have to think about those and have some contingency, some backup plans, some what ifs of if a tool stop, if a certain company goes out of business, right? Are we building some of our processes around the solution in whole, an idea, or a specific tool or platform or company?
Sure.
That is something that has to be considered for sure.
And I think a lot of people do, right? Because we've all been affected by this whole same, like if Netflix goes down at 7 o'clock, like, which it's been a long time since that's happened to me, but not worked. But when it does, like, it's like, oh, this is like kind of this could be a real problem.
Yeah.
So for corporate enterprise clients, that is a thing they're already really considering. Like, oh, we don't even want to invest in that until there's like, whether it's like some on-prem or some like, they can host it on their own servers and like, and that's a whole nother thing, servers and data centers and all that sort of stuff. But definitely an issue. So with digital twins, man, I'm kind of with what I see a lot on social media, like point cloud's kind of the way, you can go in and do your scan and then tying in, being able to take those objects, have connectors, that then pull data, whatever, and that's, out in the field, whatever that's like, store that data in a clean, in a good way, and then be able to pull up that data and then either do analysis or, have some sort of warnings, whatever that is, right? I think that's generally in my world kind of like, that's a digital twin.
Yeah.
For
sure.
Because I know a lot of people, like Autodesk Tandem.
Yeah.
That's like the Revit. You have to design it in Revit, push it to Tandem, then you can start hooking up connectors, and they're still working on it. And I don't know if you've used it before, but I don't mean to be name dropping.
No. Yeah. You're good to do.
I don't get any money from Autodesk.
Hey, you can talk about any platforms, anything you play with.
And I think it's really cool. But I think generally most people would probably say like the whole point cloud and then connecting the data, to whatever those objects are within that point cloud. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are looking at that and trying to work on that because there's a certain cost to collect the data. The point cloud is the most detailed, accurate data because it's everything as it sits, as it was captured. It's so much data. It's so much information. What typically happens is people dumb it down, right? They use the point cloud to then create a more simplistic model because it's lighter weight. It doesn't have so much detail. It's not so heavy. It can stream online better. But it also takes a lot of time and effort or cost to create that model from the data. So I think that is a convergence that we're going to see more of, and we're seeing some of it now. And change management I've seen as a huge problem. Okay, so let's say you take your point cloud, you do the BIM thing, so now you've got like, solid geometry. Something changes out in the field. So now like how do you that it's doable. I'm not saying it's like how do you do that, but then how do you manage all that change management that goes along with that? And I think there's some cool platforms out there, that really excel in the industrial side of things. I love seeing the stuff that's out there today. Yeah, that is still a big question mark for people that have ongoing living facilities where it's like, hey, we want to keep it updated forever. It's like, okay, well, do you deal with that by swapping out areas of scan data, Or do you build a model so that if you go out and update with scanning, you can update the model so the model is always current? It is a difficulty because, what would be ideal is that the scanning platforms, you scan this room, right? And we go move a chair, we rescan the room. We should be able to just dump that data in and say, prioritize the data with the most recent date, update. It moves the chair, it cleans the data out, but you didn't have to redo the whole job. And that doesn't exist yet.
Really?
Everything's still kind of a manual process of like, oh, I got to clip out the whole room and replace it. And I got to deal with the manual. But
interesting.
That is where, again, I think AI and with processes like that, like starting to integrate, I don't think it'll be that far before those processes are there.
Yeah, man, I can only imagine the processing power to also do that is probably pretty crazy.
It is.
So like when you think of like engineers scanners, kind of like Einscan, kind of for the small engineered models, it can kind of do that pretty well, right? Kind of like analyzes the mesh, like which one is like the most recent, and how do you override it and align it, and override it, and all that sort of stuff. But it takes like a pretty beefy GPU to do a small object.
Yeah.
Right?
So take a whole building. or a whole campus. Or a whole.
I can't imagine. I mean, you'd have to like walk away for weeks. So
those are some of the processes that I think people figure out manually by themselves, but there's not like this industry, process for yet.
Sure.
Those are some of the things I think softwares will catch up. It's part of what we're trying to work on with our committees. That is something that we launched where we're like, look, there are so many of these question marks for people out there across the industry. Let's create these committees where professionals are working together to identify pain points, work toward problem statements, work toward, pilot projects, but do it as a collective instead of one company do it all by themselves. Let's do it collectively. It makes it easier. And then we share the results.
Yeah.
So we can come back with these outcomes and say, look, as a group, we determined this is the best technology to use to collect this type of information.
Sure.
And now we share those results so people have material to kind of use to build off of.
Right. So let me ask, is there a committee today or governing body that's leading that?
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
There's not. When it comes to all of these technologies and how they work together and standard guidelines and processes, and it's why we're starting it, is there's not really anyone focused on that.
Yeah.
So, we'll use scanners as an example, right? If you're not yet doing laser scanning, how do you go about determining what scanner to buy?
Right.
And what workflow to use with that scanner to meet a certain accuracy?
Yeah.
And what are the best platforms to then take that data and create the deliverables you need out of it?
Yeah.
There's no one helping guide that process. It's all the Wild West. It's all like Google yourself to death.
Yeah, or other, getting in touch with the manufacturer, and then now obviously it's
now you're narrowed into one product. But there's not a lot of information out there to help people along that journey, select the right gear, understand accuracies, understand workflows. It really is the Wild West of the industry where it's like, you're kind of buying whatever you first get sold, or you're Googling stuff, but then you're only finding whatever the people are in the top search results.
Sure.
So we're hoping to kind of solve some of that problem and even create a place where you can go to and learn about all the available hardware, all the available software, what the pros and cons are, so that we can guide companies along the decision-making process of what works best for their use case and their goals.
Right. Probably likely similar to the industry that I'm in. There's probably no formal education route.
Yeah, not really. There are universities that are starting to integrate some of these tools and technologies. Like there are some construction management programs, and there are some BIM courses and things at universities, but most of them barely touch on some of the tools. Like they might have a class on laser scanning where they introduce them to the idea, but again, nobody's coming out of a school or a formal education knowing how to do the things that our industry needs.
Right.
They know it might exist.
Right.
And very few that are even that far.
Right.
So most of the education, the awareness building, the guidelines, the training right now are coming from self-taught individuals. our goal is to kind of be an in-between where we see education really lacking behind, and we see that it's really difficult for companies to do it all themselves internally. We're saying, look, we could be an in-between where maybe we're not an official government entity, we're not demanding a standard, we're not a university, but what we can do is gather the expertise of the industry and say, let's solve these problems we're all having. Maybe we create the training material, we come up with an industry standard or best practice, and if the industry is open to adopting it, it doesn't matter if we are that leading organization. We can be one internally for our own industry.
So I'm curious now. I don't know if this is the right term, right? Terrestrial scanners versus drones.
Yeah.
Right. Like where is that all encompassing? Are they close enough where it can be encompassing, or is there too much separation between the two?
We're focused on all of the technologies. So the committees that we're focusing on are laser scanning and LiDAR, drones and payloads, digital twins, BIM, 360 cameras, because we see all these technologies across the ecosystem for construction technology, right? That have to do with collecting any information, creating deliverables, visualizing data. We see the need to kind of dig into each of those individually and then help dissect how they integrate into different industries. So that's a question mark, right? A lot of people don't know, if they're not deep in the technology, they don't know why you would use a terrestrial scanner versus a SLAM scanner versus a drone.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, they all say that they do scanning, right?
Right.
Until you get into those really intricacies, you don't know, okay, well, how accurate is one versus the other?
Sure.
What type of deliverable can come out of it?
Yeah.
What's the density of data? Can I take the point cloud from any of those solutions into the modeling software? What file formats? There's so many things that's what we kind of want to dissect, is saying we need those guidelines so people understand the differences between the tools, when to ask for one versus the other. Even in one of our committee meetings today, there was someone talking about, the need for owners to understand this information, because it is getting to the point that asset owners and organizations are saying, we believe in the tools, but we don't know it enough to even know what to ask for. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we ask for somebody to come perform the services properly?
Right. So like some sort of rep in between, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
There's always a client rep, right? Now they need to be savvy enough to
they need to understand these technologies so they can help the client say, okay, we know you are doing this major project. We know you need reality capture and you don't know what to ask for. We're going to help you define what should even be in an RFP of, here's the type of gear, here's the workflow, here's your quality control process. Because that's a big miss as well. There's a lack of expertise and a lack of professionals and resources that understand these enough to scale the industry and stay up with the adoption.
Sure. So if I were to kind of just, ask you a devil's advocate sort of question, when you say there's not enough of that, is that because maybe there's not enough of the problem?
Nope.
Cool. Well, it's always that whole pain and solution thing. What if the pain, and I say that because it's the pain of in my world, if stuff fails, it's not the worst pain ever.
Yep.
People get yelled at, whatever.
Yep.
But tell me what that's like in terms of how bad that pain is, and just what that landscape's like.
Yeah, I mean, there's many examples, but if we boil it even to just construction projects in whole, right? There's so much waste in construction. There's so much headache in construction. There's safety issues in construction. There's all these reasons that construction companies and even the owners of the projects want these tools implemented because they've been proven. They've been used enough at this point to show it reduces labor needs. It reduces clashes in construction. Mm-hmm. It reduces wasted time. It improves safety. There's so many benefits that it is a need for organizations.
Yeah.
However, there's not enough resources to actually implement it on the scale of projects that are out there.
Sure.
I won't use a name, but I'll throw out an oil and gas company, right? There are oil and gas companies out there that have determined these technologies we need. We need to digitize all our facilities. We need the ability for people to collaborate on them virtually and remotely without traveling to the facility. it's safer for us to have someone go in there and capture it digitally than have all these people go walk on site because of the potential hazards.
The shutdowns, you have to do all the procedures.
Yeah. So there's so many benefits to doing it that an asset owner might say, we want this on every facility. Well, now how do they, in a reasonable time frame, at a reasonable cost, in a way that is uniform, same type of deliverable coming out of it, how do they capture thousands of facilities around the world right now? Well, there is no provider in the world that can accomplish that in a reasonable way. There just isn't. There's a lot of small firms. There's people with internal groups. There's people that have industry experience in different ways. Like, the only way to accomplish that is to start building some standard processes to say, okay, well, you need to build a guideline to say, here's the type of tool we need. Here's the process that we require for our job. Here's the deliverable format so that we can get it into this type of platform, so that you can then go out and bring in multiple providers, but still get the same results. So that is just one organization. That's happening across so many different industries, from companies who have hundreds of warehouses, thousands of real estate buildings. There's lots of demand for it. The problem is they don't even know exactly how to ask for it or who to have do the work. It's still just, again, it's kind of Wild West out there.
So let me ask you something. I've always had this need, right, for we make site visits onto job sites, right? And we got to like make sure people are putting stuff in the right spots, kind of infrastructure stuff. Then it's like, man, that's like a lot of wasted traveling and time. And, in terms of like, I think this might exist, but a 360 cam once a week on a construct, and I know they make the helmets with the cameras and stuff, but it's like, well, then like how does that information then get disseminated to like all the trades? And then like back to that process, how do you use this data? Right.
And what I think is that the technologies that exist today are good enough and could be used to solve a lot of those problems. It does come down to, well, which one and how do we use it and how do we share it and what's shareable? And I look at something like that and say, in the future, I think it would be way better. Like, companies should not be flying across the country to go to a facility, to do a job walk, to do, Usually when there's a project like that, it's multiple stakeholders. They're having people fly from all over the place just to go take their own pictures, right? And make their own notes. What should happen is there should be a network of providers all around the country, world, really, but let's just talk about US right now. Like, there are companies in every state who do 360 photo capture. In the future, it would be much better for companies to say, let's use a local provider, 0 flights, travel costs are gone, let's use a local provider, have them go out there in one day, do a job walk through 360 video, we take that data and we share it out to all parties that need to do a virtual job walk and do a bid. That technology is there now. It would be so much cheaper. There would be more data that's shareable between parties. But that's not really happening yet.
No, it's not. And man, I can already see like all the, I can imagine like all of the people, the stakeholders, or whoever's important that needs to see that sort of stuff, everyone just fumbling on their computers or their phones. Like, I don't know how to do this.
And that's where it comes down to, I think, again, the benefits are there. The technology is there. It comes down to an education and a use case and maybe some training and that type of thing. But some of those platforms are good enough that it's very user-friendly. You can open it on your computer. You can open it on your phone. It is cloud, so it's not laggy. You don't need a massive computer. Like, it's very user-friendly. Some of those are there and ready to do that today.
No, I think that's, and I don't know if it's like a mentality thing or just like the way we've always done it approach, where it's like, why can't we, like create a archive on a job site, right? So if I need to go back and be like, I got to go back 3 months, I got to see when, whatever trade did whatever, like, can I look behind the walls and see what's going on, or see where things were placed? I mean, I know it exists.
Some firms are doing it now. it's not yet an industry-wide that everybody's doing it. Some of the construction firms and stuff that have gone through this, though, they have fully adopted it where they're having someone on site go walk through the building every single day.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy. It's so fast.
Yeah.
They have a 360 camera doing video walks on a hard hat. They have daily progress.
Yeah.
Something ever comes up, a question comes up, they can go back through their platform and pick a date and look at exactly the status of the site.
Yeah. That's and you know, photogrammetry and all this sort of stuff, which obviously that's a perfect instance where you don't need that insane resolution or detail, right, of point clouds.
Yep. And that becomes that ecosystem, and that question mark for people is like, well, when should I use which tool? Mm-hmm. I mean, the price ranges are all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
When is photogrammetry enough? When do I just really need a 360 video to look at something? Well, when do I actually need measurement data? And if I need measurement data, which tool should be used? Because some are more expensive than others. Sure. Why is one laser scanner $16,000 and one is $140,000? Yeah. They're like, I just want the cheaper one. That sounds nice. They both say they do scanning. Yeah. So there's all those question marks that have to be solved. But I think that education is the path. Like, if we as a community can work through those use cases and those problems and those guidelines and show the use case of the tools, it's not a tool problem, it's a process and a user problem. Mm-hmm. The tools are ready to implement and be used, and the use cases are there, the benefits are there, but we need to get more people aware of that, and then it becomes a training thing too. Like if a company decided today they're not doing any scanning, but they get sold, right? They get convinced of scanning, and they want to implement it on their jobs. How do they get up to speed?
Yeah.
There's nothing available. There's no training available. You can't go take an expert laser scanning course. Like, it's either you find an individual who might help you and get you started, or you figure it out yourself and you mess up a bunch.
Yeah.
Those are some of the gaps that we want to try to fulfill.
Yeah.
Because that's why it's not scalable yet.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing a lot more like VDC sort of groups internally.
Yes.
Right? When they kind of actually push these technologies and make them really useful. But even, you know, we've worked with some pretty big general contractors recently, and, you know, still way over their heads.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In fact, I get like not weirded out, but I'm still like amazed how many projects are still in CAD, like 2D. Like,
oh yeah.
AutoCAD.
Yeah. And it is a very slow growth.
Yeah.
And it does come back to some of those mental things, those mentalities of just like, look, I already know how to do it really well in 2D.
Yeah.
I don't want to take the time. I don't want to take the cost.
Or
I don't want to.
The one time they got burned for whatever reason.
Yep.
You know, hey, we took a gamble and we hired someone in Revit and we lost money. You know, whatever it is. You know, then they revert back.
Yep.
So, yeah, man, I think there's just so many cool things happening out there, and like, you know, like on a personal level with AI and stuff. You know, I don't. It's not like I'm really great at utilizing it, but I feel like AI has given me like this really knowledgeable friend who's willing to talk about any silly ideas I have and like give me like from, you know, and as a business owner, entrepreneur, man, like that alone has like helped us tremendously.
Yeah.
You know, like I wrote up with ChatGPT's help, some Python script to transform some data that we needed, and I didn't have to go out to my guy and go through that process and figure out, you know.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
Yep.
Right? So I think for a lot of the folks out there, if you're not leveraging it in a way where it like helps you like professionally and personally, I mean, I think there's a lot to do with it.
Totally.
You know?
I mean, and that let's segue there a little bit. Yeah. Let's talk about we talked about some of the technology, some of the industry you're in. Yeah. Let's throw around a little bit about startup, running a company, you know, building a team, some of the struggles that you go through, some of the recommendations for people that are trying to get on that journey. Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh man, I love this sort of stuff. Man, so like I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they know really early on, right? Like, oh man, they're like, I got to do my thing, right? Like I got value to bring to the world. Some people also know like, hey, I like my, you know, maybe it's the 9 to 5 or just like, you know, I get to like enjoy my afternoons, right? So for entrepreneurs and the whole startup and like what that is, we have that burning desire. We're all pretty ambitious, you know. I think my biggest advice for someone, man, is focus. Like my co-founder Andrew Swan, he always says less is more. right?
Yeah.
So like if you have a service, a product, whatever it is, right? Like think of it like if you have one persona you're chasing, like with one focused message, with that solves one problem. When you can really focus what you're doing, you will find more traction.
Yeah.
Right. And then like we all want to go do more and more things, but
Yeah.
like get really good at that one thing. Make that thing work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generate revenue. Do that one thing and then start expanding.
Yep.
I think I see a lot of people with just like really overarching ambitions for cool stuff. And I'm still there. I'm still trying to whittle away what that is.
Yep.
But yeah, when you start really focusing what you're really, really great at, and then you might feel like you're doing yourself disjustice, like saying like, hey, I can help all corporate professionals.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sure, you could.
Yeah.
But like maybe it's that one very specific personality type that like that exact person is who you need to go find.
Yep.
A few times.
Yep.
Just keep doing that.
One thing that was said on our we had a panel at our conference last year that was focused on company culture and innovation. One thing that was said that it's been said a lot after that is the killer of one great idea is 5 great ideas.
100%.
It's like you can't, and that's something that you have to think about with whether you're building a business or you're looking at all these technologies that do exist. Like we talk about all of them. We talk about how important all of them are. But what you can't do or you're going to fail is go try to implement all of them at once.
100%.
It's like pick a starting point. If you're not yet using these tools, pick one to start. Don't try to become the expert at, okay, I got to do my own control and my own laser scanning and my own drone work, and I have to process the data and make the models and do pick a piece and figure out how to integrate that and make it work. And you can, again, whether this is internal or as a business, partner, collaborate, find other people who do the pieces that you don't do. It's the same idea of building a company or building a team is like surround yourself with people that have strengths that you don't have, right?
Yeah.
Don't try to learn how to do everything yourself. And that's why I love community so much.
Yeah.
That's why I love the conference and building relationships with people is the power of teamwork and the power of collaboration. When you build relationships with people who are the experts in other things, you have that team that when you find a problem, you can say, hey, I'm not the guy to do this thing, but I know the guy.
Yeah.
And I know how to do this part.
Yeah.
Together, we can accomplish a project that nobody could have done by themselves.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is also kind of this like this idea. I'm a real huge fan of like Stoicism, right? And like what that is. I think it's really helped me kind of mold me as the person I am today. Like don't see everyone as competition.
Oh no.
People, I see this all the time where it's like you kind of feel threatened by people, but like that doesn't mean like internally you might feel like, just kind of like a probably an instinctual thing. But that doesn't mean they're competition. And if they are competition, that's okay too.
Totally.
Like be friends with your competitors. Like
totally.
They might need you. You might need them.
Oh, Yeah, I love talking about that.
Yeah.
It's something that so many people stay too focused on, and there's so many pieces to it. It's that limited mindset of thinking that like, if someone else wins, I'm going to lose.
Right.
As opposed to there's enough opportunity that everyone can win.
Yeah.
It's good to collaborate. When I first started my business, my services company, Nexus 3D Consulting, 8 years ago, my clients were my competitors.
Right.
Even your competitors may need to work with you, may want to work with you, may need to collaborate. And in this space around all these technologies, that's very true because even the companies that do these services internally, they end up getting so much of their own work, they can't handle it all.
Yeah.
Like being good with relationships, not burning bridges, just being a good person, that ends up bringing opportunity to you.
Yeah. And I think you said it, like we see this all the time where, yes, a company can do exactly what we do.
Yep.
Right. Like on a piece of paper, they're checking all the same boxes we can. But at some point they might go, hey, we have too much. We don't know how to do this part. Because, smaller companies, there is this sort of agility and innovation thing that we get to kind of carry around versus those bigger, those bigger groups. So yeah, man, the competition, as business owners, don't be afraid of competition.
Yep.
And maybe that's where this instinctual thing kind of takes over in terms of like, yeah, they might be, taking my food, right? Like it's like this really basic thing. But yeah, man, if you lean into that, I think you grow a lot of relationships.
Totally. And I think, unfortunately, there are people out there too that will stab you in the back.
Oh yeah.
And I think that causes some people to be concerned. And I've seen a bit of it out there. I think the best way to get around that is just actually be a trustworthy, honest person.
Yeah.
Like
transparent.
If you are honest, transparent, trustworthy, build those as qualities for yourself and for your company, then people are more open to bring those walls down and go, okay, I tested the waters a little. I saw that guy was willing to talk with me, even give me some advice.
Yeah.
I'm willing to talk with them now. Sometimes you have to go through those entry level steps because some people are very guarded and afraid of that.
Yeah.
Even just this week, I had people come to me as with a concern of that, with what we're building.
Yeah.
I try to be very, very open and honest of look, my whole intention with what we're building with RCN is totally in a way to benefit the community. Now, if some people are concerned that I might gain some type of business because of that, well, that might happen. That is a default of that happening. But if success from one person scares you and you don't want to be involved, unfortunately, all that's going to do is cause hindrance for you. Mm-hmm. This is something you just learn about business is if people don't know you, if you don't show up, if you're not in the room, nobody's going to work with you, right?
Right.
If you're afraid of your competition, you should show up even more.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's all about relationships. People say that often, right? Your network is your net worth. You have to meet people. You have to know people.
Yeah.
If you just are a good person and you show up, that will help you build those relationships.
Oh, dude, there's a few things, man. It's almost like, this is so funny, man. If you show up at the right time, with the right attitude, with the right uniform, right? You're already many leagues above most people, right? So then your competition is probably thinking of you like you're occupying their headspace more than they're occupying yours.
Oh, yeah.
If you're focused on what you're doing and you're scaring people like that, we see it all the time, man. And it's kind of funny when you see that happening. Another thing I want to say is to the entrepreneurs and the people out there, I think there's a lot of that going on with a lot of these layoffs and a few things. You will have more people standing in front of you doubting, that doubt you.
Oh yeah.
At first, right? And it came to me, I realized this not too long ago, that there's more people, and it might be kind of cloaked in this way of a good friend is they kind of doubt you, but that's like a seed of doubt that'll grow over time. So you got all these people that kind of maybe doubt you or just okay, yeah, do your thing, see what happens. You might have to apply for jobs. But the people that really support you, they come after that. So if you can get past that wave, and then there's people rooting for you.
Oh yeah,
and you'll see it. Those are the people that really want you to win.
Yep.
It just takes a little bit of time.
Yep.
And we all have that one or two people that at first, but stick with it, and you will see more people want you to succeed than you realized.
Yeah, and it's something you learn throughout career, whether business owner or not. You can't make everybody happy.
No.
There are going to be people that don't like you if you do something right.
It's not even personal.
No.
It's just
you have to learn to not take everything. Take everything with a grain of salt.
Oh yeah.
Both the positive and the negative.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think, want to give up when they get discouraged or they get people that are haters, right? When you grow something and you start gaining some level of success with your company, those people will be there too. And you have to learn, look, I can't let the worry of what other people think about me stop me from pursuing my vision and mission. I know why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I know the positive impact I'm making.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep moving forward. I feel bad for people who think maybe there's a bad intention or there's it is a competition. All I can do is give some feedback, and keep going, and keep going, and keep going, and keep showing up.
Yeah. No, you seriously nailed it. I see a lot of my, friends and family and, people that have ambition, they get stuck at that spot.
Yeah.
They're afraid of that judgment, right? Like they're afraid of like, okay, the first time you fumble, people are going to laugh at you. Yeah, that is the case, but you gotta pick it back up and keep going.
Yep.
Dude, I was definitely not a victim, but like that was definitely my mentality at first, for a long time, right?
Yeah.
In my 20s, I'm like, it was really hard for me to overcome that. And I don't know if it was through confirmation or like, at least some sort of confidence building throughout my, as I become an adult.
Yep.
I've gotten past that, and it's still hard.
Yeah.
You don't like master it and like, move on. I mean, it's just some part of business, man.
Totally. Yeah.
Part of business.
Yeah. You have to be, and this, again, whether entrepreneur or adopting a technology in a company, you have to be willing to be bad, and you have to be willing to take those baby steps of like, look, it's not going to go perfect on day 1.
No.
It's not going to go perfect on day 10. The journey of doing something new, doing something innovative, starting a company, building a department, adopting a technology, you have to go into it knowing it's going to be difficult. Yeah. There's going to be failures. There's going to be roadblocks. As long as you know that, you take when a problem comes to you, you take the problem and you say, okay, a problem has come up. How do we solve it?
Yeah.
How do we work around it?
Yeah.
How do we get over it? As long as you don't look at failures as the roadblock, I hit the wall, I'm turning around, I'm giving up.
Yeah.
As long as you go into it knowing there's always a way around it.
Yeah.
You can always figure it out. Then whatever comes up, you'll find the next step.
Yeah. It's funny. Someone once told me I've got a hacky mentality where like you got to kind of hack through a problem.
Oh yeah.
Whatever it is, right? Like if you need like a proof of concept, some sort of measurement to say yes or no, whatever that is, right? You don't know how to do it. Well, you got to go figure it out. You got to kind of hack your way through it. And I think that's one of my like favorite traits about me is like usually I can hack my way through it to at least, kind of get to where we need to go. And then I can let the people who are really good at that go from there.
Oh, totally. Totally. Okay. As we start winding down.
Yeah, man.
Let's leave a few pieces of advice or some thoughts that you've had over time.
Sure.
Some quotes. I know, like you said, your Stoicism's big for you.
Yeah.
Like, what are some things you want to leave us with today?
Oh man, like like the raising the tide, right?
Yeah.
Like elevates all the boats. I think that's huge, man. When
it is.
Back to like, don't think of everyone as competition.
Yep.
There are malicious people that are competition. I get that, right? It's not like everyone's your best friend. But yeah, try to help everyone out in the process, and that takes a lot out of someone. It takes a lot of like networking, for example. You might think it's like shaking hands, but you got to like bring some sort of value to that interaction, what that might be. So yeah, it's a lot of giving.
Totally.
Like don't expect if you don't expect anything and you just give. I don't know, like the world becomes a little better in my perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. It's one that a lot of people, if they made that small tweak, would do so much better.
Yeah.
So many people, I'll just go straight to even LinkedIn as an example, right? Like if you connect with someone new and you immediately send them a message that is trying to get something from them. Yeah. Hey, this is what I do. I want your business. Like it's such a put off. Yeah. It's such a way to close the door and close a relationship before it ever even started.
Yeah.
If you take the patient approach of like, look, I genuinely want to connect with people. I genuinely want to learn about them, figure out if there's anything I can do to help their cause, and maybe at some point something will come back to me out of it.
Yeah.
That is, if people made that one switch, the people that don't yet do that, if they made that one switch, it would completely change how they get interactions and the network building and the relationship building, because people don't want to just be taken from.
No.
And as soon as you do that, it's like, oh my gosh, remove, close the door. Don't just come on and pitch me.
Yeah.
Care about other people first and give, and then you're right. It'll come back at some point.
Just give, and I mean it's not don't give everything away, but like definitely be
just most of it.
Yeah, just most. Well, be helpful, right? Like be considerate, and give out information. If your information of what you do is like the secret sauce of your business. Like you need more, right? Like, the value or the implementation or whatever it might be, right? But point is like give, and I think I've found a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. When you can find something you're good at that you love doing and it helps other people.
Yeah.
You won.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Awesome.
So,
all right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you, man. This is a really quick turnaround. I think it was like not even like 36 hours ago, right?
Yeah.
10 o'clock at night. Hey, can you be here on Wednesday?
Yes.
Sure.
That's how you do it. You know?
Man.
Yeah.
Felt right.
The benefit of having a local studio, I'm like, all right, we're going to get local people in.
Yeah.
I want to talk to people here in the Boise area, start building some more of the community here locally. Obviously, our network and our collaborators are globally, but I love the fact that we've got a local studio we can bring people into, spend some time with, build relationships. So appreciate you coming in.
Dude. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you guys next time.